Good afternoon. Let's get started here. We left off last time at the McCarran-Walter Act. After slogging our way through a whole lot of other acts and pieces of legislation, I apologize that the 20th century is so full of immigration legislation. But that's really the character of it. I think there's a real change between the 19th century and the 20th century. That in the 19th century we saw lots of other forces acting on immigration. In the 20th and 21st century, the 500-pound gorilla is public policy. It is the law. It's how many immigrants are allowed and under what conditions and which ones that really determine who comes to the United States. And so we're going to spend yet a little more time. The McCarran-Walter Act is, in a sense, the high watermark for restrictionists. This is the act in 1952, goes into effect in 1953, and this is the act that is very emblematic of the Cold War view, the hysterical period of the Cold War's view on immigration. The other interesting aspect of it is that it's politically a very savvy bill, because, as you mentioned, McCarran and Walter were very anxious to appear to be reforming immigration. This is because there was a growing force that will finally overtake the restrictionist force, towards making our immigration laws race and ethnicity neutral. This was an important Cold War imperative, also a civil rights imperative. We're going to get to that story shortly. But today we're going to finish talking about the McCarran-Walter Act and its specific provisions and effects, and then we're going to march forward through the Eisenhower years and the Kennedy years, and finally get to the 1965 Hart-Sellers Act, which finally undoes the Nationality Quota Act. There's not a lot of legislation in between, I'm happy to say. So we talked about some of the specific provisions before, but I wanted to emphasize a couple of interesting ones. First, the McCarran-Walter Act and agents. This is an important aspect. Remember, we're only a few years after World War II, and during World War II, we saw finally the dismantling of the Chinese exclusions and several other bars to naturalization. The McCarran-Walter Act finally eliminates all racial bars to naturalization. This, McCarran and Walter touted as really very liberal, very, very strong reform of our Nationalities Act. And this is the piece that they touted as the counter to the propaganda that was the communist side of the Cold War was putting out, that Americans were racist. Here, everybody was going to be treated equally. But of course, the reality was that the quotas granted to Asian countries were very, very small, on the order of 100 or so per country. And there were various oddities about that, because China got a few more and Japan got a few more for obscure reasons. But the idea, from McCarran and Walter's point of view, was here was a law we could make that looked very liberal. Look at that, we're going to take down the bars to naturalization that have existed in some form since 1790. But at the same time, of course, there would be nobody here to take advantage of that liberalization. But they still had this slight small fig leaf that they could argue, was that based on the 1924 Quota Act, as implemented in 1929, most countries got 0.16% of their calculated national origin in 1920. Remember, that law had this idea of national origins, not birthplace. And if you looked at that if you calculate that for the Asian countries, it would actually be smaller than 100. Right? That's of course the legacy of having excluded them for so long. So there was again a whole lot of rhetoric that McCarran and Walter could bring to bear. But the main point, as far as Asians were concerned, was that this wasn't going to change anything except symbolically. Yes. Yeah, the immigration is quite low from Asian countries under the McCarran-Walter Act. Remember, this is 1952 and 53. Now we'll see there are some differences. There are some exceptions, yes, but for the most part, the Asian immigration doesn't really begin until 1965. It's a very small part of the mix until then. Okay. And also, I want to point out that this is a very peculiar piece to it. That Asians born outside of Asia are still counted against a national quota, even though in terms of nationality they're not part of it, but they're not counted completely against it as they would have been under a 1924 style act. This time it's 1/2. This is a very odd half recognition that Asian nationalities are not racist any more than European nationalities. They're getting halfway there, right? Okay, the idea is, if your parents were German and you were born in Canada, you're Canadian. You're 100% Canadian as far as immigration law is concerned. But if your parents were born in China and you were born in Canada, you're half Chinese as far as, and for immigration purposes, you count half against the Chinese quota. Yes, it's that strange. Okay. Western Hemisphere migrants is another big issue, and talked about it quite a lot. The argument, or the interesting piece in here is that the southern and western agricultural interests are dead set on keeping Western Hemisphere immigration, even though the real hardcore restrictionists are against it. So it's an ideological problem for keeping the coalition of restrictionists together. McCarran-Walter retains the non-quota status for Western Hemisphere immigrants, but it didn't alter the literacy test, didn't change the $8 head tax, and there were some other humiliations, such as mandatory fumigation at the border, a policy that was only applied to the Mexican border. This was not something that Congress enacted. It's something that the Immigration Naturalization Service did on their own. They simply required Mexicans and Mexicans alone, or even crossing the southern border, to bathe in some foul, life-stealing chemicals and have their clothes steam cleaned. This is something that for obvious reasons, people hated. And all these together gave an inducement for illegal immigration. It wasn't very difficult to evade the authorities. If you're coming in to do agricultural work, you don't really need to be legal. And so this didn't change that very much. Yes?
Western Hemisphere immigrants are predominantly Mexican.
Yeah, predominantly Mexican, yeah. I mean, they also include, obviously, Canadians at this point, but Canadians don't really present a very interesting political problem for some reason. Aren't that many of them, and they, as we'll see in the 1950s, there's a big hue and cry about undocumented immigrants in California, but nobody's mentioning the Canadians. So very much like today, there are quite a large number of undocumented immigrants today that are not from Mexico either, and they don't seem to be raising the same concerns. In any case, at this time, the Bracero program had recently been reauthorized, and the Bracero program included some penalties for employers of undocumented immigrants. It had been a very contentious debate on Public Law 78, and part of the compromise was that the Bracero program was only going to be operating in areas where there were labor shortages. So we're going to be able to use Braceros, for example, in industrial labor. And there were these penalties for employers. But the McCarran-Walter Act, as I pointed out, includes also penalties for harboring undocumented immigrants. But the Texas Proviso, what came to be known as the Texas Proviso, was included, which specifically defined harboring as things that did not include employing. So the penalties, there were no penalties for employing. There were penalties for smuggling undocumented workers in. There were penalties for transporting them around, but there were no penalties for employing them. Again, this is the kind of law that McCarran-Walter Act was. There were provisions, and then there were little subtle contradictory provisions that undid things. And so the net effect was the status quo as far as Western Hemisphere immigrants were concerned. There were no position of a quota, and all of the bars to legal immigration stayed in place. So the incentives were still in place for illegal immigration. Right? Still, even though Mexicans were not impeded by quotas, there were these other things that impeded them, and so it did make. So we still had a significant number of undocumented Mexican immigrants coming to work in fields, and it's I think somewhat clear that that's the way the McCarran wanted it to be. It gave power to the employer if the workers were undocumented. So they were happy to have this, and they were able to keep the INS from enforcing whatever laws there were. Okay. Finally, there's a significant innovation in the McCarran-Walter Act, and that's preferences. 50% of all the preferences, these were going to be within the quotas, right? So within the existing national quota for each country, 50% of the slots were to be given to people with skills and education useful to our nation. That is interesting because, first of all, it makes very clear and explicit that U.S. needs come before the needs of immigrants. That's probably always been true, but it's a little more explicit now than it had been before. This is now a law that's going to attempt at least to tailor the immigration stream into something that the nation sees as benefiting itself, right? For other reasons than diversity and our national self-view, but something that will actually have an economic benefit. This is certainly the trend in immigration law in other parts of the world as well. But also, there's also politics here, because who's going to decide what is useful to our nation? That's going to be a nice administrative piece. As we've talked about before, how laws are enforced becomes as important, is as important as what the laws actually are. 30% are for parents of adult American citizens. The children and spouses are exempt from quotas. Right? So this is one of the few quota exemptions, well, Western Hemisphere plus spouses and children of citizens. And then there's a none of the above. A none of the above, which is interesting. So people who fit into none of these categories can still apply. And if there's still room in the national quotas, they may migrate. So this is the first instance of having this preference system, but we'll see it's going to stay. This is an idea that enters the immigration debate here with McCarran-Walter Act. The Hart-Celler Act is going to undo a whole lot of stuff, but it's going to maintain the idea of preference categories. So this is an idea that is still with us today. Truman did not like this law. He said in his veto message, "Today we are protecting ourselves as we were in 1924 against being flooded by immigrants from Eastern Europe. This is fantastic. We do not need to be protected against immigrants from these countries. On the contrary, we want to stretch out a helping hand to save those who have managed to flee into Western Europe, to succor those who are brave enough to escape from barbarism, to welcome and restore them against the day when their countries will, as we hope, be free again. These are only a few examples of the absurdity, the cruelty of carrying over into this year of 1952 the isolationist limitations of our 1924 law. In no other realm of our national life are we so hampered and stultified by the dead hand of the past as we are in this field of immigration." Truman went on there to voice his opposition to discrimination against African and Asians and Southern and Eastern Europeans, as well as Jamaicans, Trinidad and Tobagans. He thought more immigrants should be allowed in. He thought it was anti-family, letting in only the spouses and minor children of citizens as non-quota immigrants. And most of all, he thought it would impede foreign policy because it was going to impede the immigration. It was not going to let the president allow the communist refugees into the country. And that Truman saw that very much, as will subsequent presidents. That's a very important foreign policy tool. The veto was overridden by a democratically controlled Congress. I mean, the Democratic Party was a majority in Congress at the time. They nonetheless overrode Truman's veto. And that is, I think, quite emblematic of the difference of opinion, which we'll see going forward, too, that the presidents tend to see the foreign policy implications of immigration law much more than Congress does. Congress remains much more isolationist. I think that's even true today when you consider how the Republican Party split over immigration reform during the Bush years. Bush was willing to, was somewhat out ahead on immigration reform. The Republican Party, which controlled Congress for a while, was very much against it. So same situation here, that imbalance. Presidents see the international implications. They see immigration as a potential foreign policy tool. Congress does not. As a final word, because of the because of Western Hemisphere and child and spouse exceptions, as well as to some extent some fancy politics that we'll see in a moment, the McCarran-Walter Act envisioned approximately 2 million immigrants. There was a quota between 1952 and 1965. I mean, according to the quotas, we would see about 2 million, but in fact, there were 3.5 million. So, like much other immigration legislation, it didn't exactly do what expected to do either. Truman, as we said, hated this law quite a bit. He hated it it was one of the things that he truly hated. And he spent a lot of time in the 1952 election as he campaigned for Adlai Stevenson denouncing this bill. He attacked Republicans for moral blindness, and he particularly attacked Richard Nixon, who was Eisenhower's running mate, for voting in favor of the McCarran-Walter Act. He said, "Republicans perpetuated a philosophy of racial superiority developed by the Nazis, which we thought we had destroyed when we defeated Nazi Germany and liberated Europe." It's pretty heated rhetoric. And the effect of Truman's attacks against the McCarran-Walter Act was to push Eisenhower in a direction that Eisenhower probably wanted to go anyway, and Eisenhower condemned the McCarran-Walter Act as well, even though he's the Republican candidate for president at this time. He does it very dramatically. He reads names of Korean War Medal of Honor winners whose ethnic background would have barred them from immigration. But then, just to keep it political, I blame the McCarran-Walter Act on a failure of presidential leadership, which would, of course, meant Truman's presidential leadership. So, in the 1952 election, both candidates hated it and blamed it on the other party, essentially. So you can see it's the high watermark of you can see from this that McCarran-Walter's Act is really that's the greatest success of the restrictionist Cold Warrior movement, and from here it's going to be largely downhill. Truman also gave Eisenhower a little present by forming a commission in the last months of his administration to investigate the effects of the nationality quota system, essentially to answer the congressional reports from the 20s that had promoted this idea of nationalities quota. So here in the 1950s, with eugenics completely defeated, shall we say, and dishonored by Hitler's use of it, they were a big target. And politically, it was clever of Truman to form a commission to go and beat them up. So he'd hold up, this commission would produce a report, and it would hold up the Nationality Quota Act as a terrible thing, and tar everybody who supported McCarran Walter with the silly ideas of the 1924 Act, which underpinned the 1924 Act. And that was when that finally came around. Eisenhower did manage to put it to a little bit of use, as we'll see. He does so in order to get this 1953 Act passed. The Eisenhower years were, again, dominated by this idea. We had a president who was very internationalist. We had Congress who was much more isolationist. And for Eisenhower, this was even more of a problem than for Truman. Truman had the DP Acts. So between a few years after 1948 all the way to 1950, the last DP Act was passed, it was possible for immigrants or for refugees from communism to immigrate to the U.S. But because this had expired by 1952, and Eisenhower needed to, or he wanted very much to allow refugees from communist countries to immigrate. So using, in part, rhetoric from Truman's commission, he asked Congress for the 1953 Refugee Act, and they passed it. This is not a big act. It's a one-off. It allows for 204,000 non-quota slots for European refugees, and it assigns specific quotas for specific nationalities. This is not a reworking of refugee policy. There still is no ongoing immigration law covering refugees. This is just a recognition that we need to allow some communist refugees to immigrate. And refugee, this is what's so important about it, I should say, the definitions here of refugee and escapee will stay with us for a while. And they are, as you see, any person in a country or area which is neither communist nor communist dominated, who because of persecution, fear of persecution, natural calamity, or military operations is out of his usual place of abode, unable to return thereto, who has not been firmly resettled, and who is in urgent assistance. And so this is a refugee, is somebody who's not in a communist country. An escapee is any refugee who, because of persecution or fear, on account of race, religion, political opinion, fled from the Soviet Union, Soviet Socialist Republics, or other communist dominated or communist occupied areas of Europe. Right? So the idea of the escapee is very much an escapee from communism. These are not humanitarian terms. These aren't people escaping for economic purposes. They're not people escaping for just any old kind of persecution. It's very specifically refugees, escapees from communism. This was not enough for Eisenhower, and events took the course, such as the failed Hungarian revolutionary attempt in 1956 and 57, drove Eisenhower to invoke an obscure parole authority provision in the McCarran-Walter Act. This is very much like when we saw in World War I, where the 1917 Immigration Act had a little piece in there for the Secretary of Labor to admit certain persons that were essential for the war effort, and the Secretary of Labor decided that was about 100,000 Mexican farm workers. Right? It wasn't what the law intended, but it was used that way. And the McCarran-Walter Act had a similar provision that gave the president some parole authority intended for specific, for unique individuals who needed to, who could be brought in, probably German scientists, who knows. But Eisenhower used it for 38,000 Hungarians after the failed revolution, and five other times, all of which had to do with communist revolutions, except for one. There was one set of refugees from Portuguese earthquake victims from the Azores, but the rest of it was all very much communist refugees. And then after he paroled them using this obscure piece of the McCarran-Walter Act, he would ask Congress to regularize their status, and Congress would do that. So that was simply the pattern in the 1950s and 60s. In the early 50s, mounting pressure from labor, organized labor, especially the AFL, and public, especially in the West, especially in Southern California, regarding an increase in undocumented immigrants. Attorney General, California Attorney General, later Governor Pat Brown, blamed all sorts of crime on undocumented immigrants, including narcotics and prostitution, all sorts of bad things. And this and other outcries induced Eisenhower to dispatch his Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General Brownell, to California to investigate. And Brownell came back saying that the situation was unacceptable, and he asked Congress to pass legislation with serious employer sanctions. Right? So again, the issue is brought up again, but this time there's a certain amount of public outcry behind it. McCarran has this to say: a farmer can get a wetback, and he does not have to go through all that red tape of the Thrust program. We might just as well face this thing realistically. The agricultural people, the farmers, want this help. They want this farm labor. They just cannot get along without it. So McCarran, again, is not about to let employer sanctions pass. And as a result, it doesn't happen. And Eisenhower appoints General Joseph Swing to be his director of INS for the explicit purpose of launching a military-style crackdown. So part of this equation of all the undocumented immigrants is that the INS doesn't enforce the law. Congress makes sure they never have the funding to do it. And so Eisenhower steps in, and being a military guy, I suppose it was natural for him to find a military solution. And so his military solution is called Operation Wetback, and took place between 1953 and 1955. And under General Swing, the INS swooped down on lots of Midwestern cities. They did this mostly where it was visible. They used authority given to them in the McCarran-Walter Act to search cars and trucks, and they apprehended something like 800,000. I think they said it was more than a million, and quote, deported them. But by 1955, the INS reported that the wetback problem no longer exists. So it was a great public relations success. But what they meant by, it turns out that what they really meant by deporting was they would find these workers, they would bring them back to Mexico, they would touch